Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the LAN Party Lawyers podcast. My name is Steve Blickensderfer, and I'm joined by my colleague and co-host, Nick Brown.
Hey, everybody.
We're coming to you in between Seasons 1 and Season 2, which is coming up. We have a lot of episodes ready for Season 2. We're excited to roll it out, but before we do, we have a special episode for you following our going to Atlanta for DreamHack 2019 and the Esports Summit, which also took place and kind of overlapped with DreamHack. Nicely, I might add. So, Nick, I wanted to kind of go over a little bit of the insights or kind of our reactions to and thoughts about the events that we attended. We also spoke at a legal panel at DreamHack, which was a lot of fun. And then we have an interview where we talked to Allie Young, CEO of Access Replay, and a board member of the newly formed Atlanta Esports Alliance. But before we get there to that interview, I wanted to just give you the floor a little bit to maybe share with me some of your takeaways from the event.
Sure. Well, the biggest takeaway is obviously Atlanta is working really hard to become a true center of esports. And they are pulling off that goal. It's amazing seeing all the enthusiasm, all the investment, and all the community involvement that's up there. That was one of the big takeaways. I mean, another one is maybe not so surprising to some. We all know DreamHack has been doing this for many years now, but it's never more clear when you show up to the event that they really know what they're doing. This was an event where we had somewhere between 30 and 35,000 people attending over the weekend, and there was high-level play going on on all sorts of games. A broad range of them. Regular listeners know I have to mention that I would have liked to seen a little bit more StarCraft at the event because that's my personal game. But I understand that sometimes it can be hard to put every game you want on there. That said, no one can be disappointed with the quality or the quantity of the games that were being played and the high-level championship type, pros that were there.
The Esports Summit was also a great event, and it overlapped with DreamHack. It was on the Thursday, Friday, where DreamHack was Friday through Sunday. It's obviously a smaller crowd, but it's more business oriented. And for me, the biggest thing were the networking opportunities. There were opportunities to visit the Turner Broadcasting Studio and INAP's data center, which was really neat. And kind of tying back to what you said earlier about Atlanta making a big push to become the center of esports, at least on the East Coast. INAP has a physical presence there, providing the actual connections to back-end servers, and so getting to see that was really cool because you can actually get a sense of how much Atlanta has maybe an advantage, and teams actually fly to practice in Atlanta because it's closer to the Fortnite servers and other game company servers. So it was cool to see and to actually see Atlanta grow in front of you. When we were there, the Atlanta Esports Alliance was announced, which is an arm of the Sports Council, which is responsible for bringing the Super Bowl to Atlanta. So I expect nothing but big things for Atlanta going forward as one of the top esports cities. So it's pretty cool to see. I think it's good for the Southeast in particular. In any event, we talked about these issues and more with our guest who's going to be on the podcast coming up. This is Allie Young, who we interviewed as CEO of Access Replay and board member of the Atlanta Esports Alliance. We talked a lot about a lot of cool issues. I think you guys are really going to enjoy hearing from her directly about this and more. So coming up, Allie Young, Access Replay. Hope you enjoy.
Thanks for listening.
So, Allie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little background on Access Replay, how it all got started?
So my background is in sales and marketing. I work for companies like Cox Media, Clear Channel, and own my own marketing firm. Our larger clients were the U.S. Army, Capitol Records, the Essence Festival in New Orleans. And I'm a gamer. I met my husband playing video games 20 years ago.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And
what game, by the way?
EverQuest.
All right.
OG.
Yeah, the OG of MMOs. And really, that's how it got started. We conceptualized this idea and it was something, the average age of a gamer actually is 34 years old. I asked
Really?
that question. Yeah, I ask that question a lot when I'm on a panel, and most people are like, 12, 13.
Maybe for some games,
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, and the thing is that gaming, and what I love about it so much is it brings people together. And it was funny. Last night, I was on a panel and I was asked how I actually got into gaming. And I was living in Colorado at the time, and I busted my knee. I tore my ACL skiing, and I was stuck at home with nothing to do. And my boyfriend at the time actually played video games, so I was like, "What is that?" It's a geek thing to do. It was my cousins did with like D&D and stuff like that, and they're in the chess club. I know how to play chess, but
Yeah.
And so that's how I got into gaming is a torn ACL.
That's fantastic.
And
Well,
silver lining, right?
That's right.
I remember. It reminds me when I was younger. I got injured playing football, and I had like a week.
you played football?
Well,
Oh,
not
man.
for
I
long.
learned something new about Nick every day.
Turns out I was more fragile than I thought. But I had a week to recover or so, and that was right after Ocarina of Time came out.
Okay.
And so my dad got me that to try to help with the pain, and it was one of the best weeks I can remember in my childhood.
Was it the golden
actually.
cartridge?
No, I didn't have the golden cartridge. This is a
We didn't
regular-
know to get you the golden
yeah,
cartridge.
but it reminded me of your ACL story.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So what about Access Replay in particular? What was the genesis to opening up or deciding to open up a space where gamers can come, where you can have LAN events and like this facility?
It's first of its kind, right?
Yes. So the real story behind Access Replay, and I can share this now that we're about to close our seed round of funding.
All right, there we go. We're hearing it live here.
That's right, yeah.
right.
Hot news.
This will be an exclusive. So about 5 years ago, I took my daughter to her first Barnes & Noble bookstore. And she was 8 at the time. She's 13 now. And, Amazon baby. Always, she loved books, but we just order stuff online, right?
Right.
So she gets into the Barnes & Noble, and as we're leaving, she said, "Mama, what would be really cool is if there was a place like this, but with video games and cupcakes and cookies."
From the mouths of babes, right?
Seriously. So she got in the back of the car and started drawing up the business plan for what is now what you see is
that's
Access
amazing.
Replay.
I love it.
I love it.
Yeah, it was really phenomenal, and but it brought to mind. My husband and I are the kind of couple we'll go out to drinks, we'll have dinner, and we'll look at our watch and be like, okay, well, meet you on Discord in 30 minutes for a few rounds of Overwatch, right?
Right.
And as I, my background in sales and marketing, started really looking and diving into the market of gamers in general, and started noticing a huge gap. I started checking out like Top Golf, right, and looking at their business model and thinking, okay, well, 40% of the U.S. population plays golf. 60% of the U.S. population plays video games.
Right.
Why isn't there a Top Golf for video games and esports?
Right, absolutely.
Right. And so, really saw an opportunity there and started creating strategic partnerships. I knew, for a space like this, when you look at other LAN centers, they're, unfortunately, they're most of the time they're in strip malls.
I was just going to say, I get this whenever I think of like an internet cafe,
Yes.
right? I get this traveling overseas, and I'm just
bunch of LEDs.
taken to like a really shady looking place where you cram as many computers
Yep.
in a row as you can. There's a guy that doesn't want to be there at the counter that's kind of checking you in. It's kind of miserable, and you feel like everyone is there because they're doing something illegal on the computers. Like how did you break that mold? Because that's the immediate thing I think of when I think of an internet LAN cafe.
Yeah, that is not this.
No.
Totally not that.
For those of you who aren't here.
No, and that's what's so exciting, right? And they don't get it until they come in here and they're like, okay,
Yeah.
I get it.
Well, that's
right?
actually so I was here a couple of weeks ago, and I was on the Beltline, which is a catty corner right next to abuts your property here.
Yes.
And I was
It's our
like,
sidewalk.
oh man, it's got signs for esports and video games. Babe, I have to check it out. So we were on the little scooters, got off the scooter, popped inside, and drew in ever since, like a moth to the flame.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
So, for those of us, who haven't been here, we walk in, this is a well-thriving, beautiful space, very clean, lots of high-tech equipment, lots of people. It's very busy.
Can you describe the space for us real quick for those who haven't seen it?
Sure. So really what we wanted to create was the experience of a Top Golf, but for video games and esports, right? And it was funny because yesterday somebody who's looking to start a LAN cafe actually was like, I was on a panel for women in esports and gaming, and he's like, so I've been to a lot of LAN centers in the country, and I've never seen a woman in one. And I said, have you been to Access Replay? Because I promise you, there's been at least one woman in there, right? So what we did here was really I wanted to create an inviting and inclusive space for families, for females, for couples to enjoy their time together, even if they're not necessarily hardcore gamers. And what we've discovered in this journey was, number one, like I said, market research. I knew location was going to be key in creating a space like this, strategic partnerships, all across the board to build something that we could scale. And we started looking for real estate a while back. And I remember when we walked into this particular space and I was like, this is it. And I almost was bouncing, right? And my team was like, Allie, you're with a realtor, please. Like, we have to negotiate.
Yeah. Put your poker face on.
Stop smiling.
Don't be so happy.
yeah. But the thing was about it, it's very bright. I mean, it's airy. There's so much natural light that comes into
What's the square
space.
footage in this space?
It's 12,000 square feet, but it's wide open, so it looks bigger. There are, it's 25-foot ceilings or whatever it is. We could build a second floor here, which is the eventual plan, is to build like a mezzanine level. And
so you can look down on gamers.
Yeah, exactly. While you're having drinks.
What about why Atlanta? What's special about Atlanta? Obviously, we have a lot of game companies here, and maybe I'm even kind of leading into the answer with High Res and Blue Mammoth. And why don't you tell us a little bit about the Atlanta esports scene and just the Atlanta video game scene in general? What makes Atlanta special?
Sure. I would have to say community. I mean, gaming is organic because of the communities that make up the gaming scene, right? And I've never really seen anything like it is in Atlanta. I mean, when you look at all the way from the top, right? I mean, I got to present on esports. I got to present on esports last week or a couple of months ago with all of the governor, the lieutenant governor, all of the legislators throughout Georgia, because we're working on getting FIFA here, right? And esports is such a big part of the sports culture that they brought it all together. It was at SunTrust Park with the Braves and the owners of the Falcons and Atlanta United, and it was just phenomenal how the whole culture of Atlanta has embraced esports. And the Atlanta Chamber has been such a huge just advocate for us, right? Partnerships with High Res and Skillshot. Todd Harris and Nabil were the first people that I met in the esports and gaming world.
Oh, okay.
And we met.
Good contact.
Absolutely.
Good start right there.
It was really like perfect, and it's funny because it's all about timing, right? But I had read that Todd was speaking at an MIT forum event, and I was like, oh, it's raining. I've got to drive an hour to get there. all right, fine, I'm just gonna go. And I went and I listened and, learned a lot. Ashish Mistry was there also from Control Freak. It was at E-League. So I met the guys at E-League that night. So, on panels, when you're on a panel, at the end of the time that people speak, you're almost like, it's almost like you're taking court, or you're holding court.
The line.
Yeah, the lines.
Yeah. Sometimes a semicircle.
Right, around the people who were on the panel, and I was like, that's stupid. I'm not number one. I don't like waiting on lines, but I was like, it's not that long. I'd like to just personally introduce myself and let them know what I'm planning on doing, and think about, and get their thoughts on it.
So that's how it started.
That's how it started.
The meeting you almost didn't go to.
The meeting
and the line you didn't almost go on.
Absolutely.
So one of the things we wanted to ask you about, we show up here. It's beautiful. It's working.
Sure.
You make it look easy. I highly doubt it was easy. Can you tell us a little bit about challenges you faced in starting this brand new endeavor and turning it into what it is?
Yeah. So one of the things that I'll mention, raising funds, like fundraising. I had never done that before. I bootstrapped my first company and sold it.
Why so easy, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I was like, first of all, I spent a year with some people who, number one, they knew a lot of people with money.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people with money, but there are not a lot of people who are the right investors.
Yeah.
Right? And so navigating that world and being, and really just, I got to the point after a year, I remember I took my team to LA for this big VC meeting, right? Mm-hmm. And also a lot of market research stuff that we had to do with checking out some of the LAN centers there, and also seeing, Esports Arena in Vegas, and, and just kind of checking out the landscape of what is already in existence. And we get to this VC meeting, and the guy's like, okay, I've got 5 minutes. You can walk with me to this interview that I'm heading to.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, we just flew 3,000 miles for a 5-minute pitch, right? And I was so pissed at the guy that set up the meeting. Like, I was like, first of all, we are going to have a conversation about this later. But it was insanity.
And it's going to take more than 5 minutes.
Yes.
So what about how often are you facing legal challenges in your day-to-day, whether it's in raising funds or finding a space? And obviously you've signed contracts along the way, but what are the most common maybe legal pressures that you have?
So actually we have, my goal for empowering females in the space has taken on kind of this crazy organic thing of its own, but we created an all-female stream casting team.
Really?
I'm not a big believer of creating an all-female gaming team, just because, for the first time ever, females, this is a sport.
Pure equality.
Yeah. There's no gender bias whatsoever.
There shouldn't be, at least.
No, absolutely not. And I feel like an all-female team will just lend itself to, to that segregation again. And then what happens with, we want to play with all girls, so then there's a, female league, and then now they can't play with the guys, and, and then, which is dumb.
And we've seen that sort of thing, unfortunately, met with a bunch of harassment and bad actors before, and it doesn't always work out.
It's not the answer. However, I feel like creating an environment for hosts or streamers, gamer streamers, and casters who want to get into casting and hosting, which is a very, very male-dominated world. It's almost, like being like a male actor. It's almost like an actor. There's already such a small percentage of success, right? And then just imagine, like, okay, there's an actual gender bias with that. So So anyhow, the streamcasting team that we put together, they're phenomenal women. They're all gamers. They have huge personalities. They're wonderful to work with. And I'm not an agency, right? I'm not a talent agency by any means whatsoever. I'm really just trying to provide opportunities, right?
Yeah.
So we do a lot of activations and events with brands. So we work with brands in there, and I'm like, oh, by the way, I'd like to, if we're looking to produce this event, I have the casters and the talent to be able to do that.
Perfect.
And then I bring them on.
Win-win.
Well, it is. It's a win-win all around. The issue that I recently came up into is that, like I said, we're not a talent agency,
Right.
so our legal team is more. I'm.
That's what happened in the TFU lawsuit. The allegations that they're running a illegal talent agency.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, signing like just a simple NDA, I don't even, there's no contract per se. It's just, it's a basic NDA, right? So one of the girls had shown a friend who, has had a lot of background in contracts and agreements. And I'm absolutely, yes, please have a legal advisor, your advisors, look at the paperwork.
Right.
You may not be surprised to hear we think that's good.
That's a great thing. That's a great thing. Well, the funny part was the person who looked at it felt like I was screwing them over.
Really?
Yeah, I was screwing their friend over. That they were looking at the paperwork, and so it was brought to my attention, and I asked, I talked to the person directly, and I said, what's the deal, right? And he said, well, you're screwing my friend over with this, and I was like, really? But she's not told me anything, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
This
she's
is the first
extremely
I'm hearing of it.
Right. And the situation was that he was like, well, it's a business contract. Yes. And we're a business.
Right.
And he was like, well, but she's just an influencer, but she's a brand and she's also a business.
Right. I feel like there's a lot of growing up in that regard that still needs to happen.
Yeah, and it was just almost like a surreal conversation that I was having.
Right. You're over here doing seed rounds and dealing with all these VCs and money, and everything's a contract this, a contract that, and then you're like, okay, well, let's just do this. It just makes here's a basic contract.
Yes,
it's the easiest one I've ever seen.
It's just a simple
no
NDA.
caps,
Nothing.
This is not a Series B. Nothing.
No, it's not even a 30-page thing. And it's not even like an agreement. Like, basically the girls are just vendors of ours, right? Like, we just pay them when it's not any kind. But the thing is then it became a question of, well, in the agreement it says that you own the media rights to whatever they're doing for you. And I was like, well, when I partner with the MLB and I sign my life away to them and they say I can't redistribute this or other partners can't redistribute this, and it's very cut and clear on what I'm allowed to do.
Right.
I'm not able to give them. I'm paying them.
Right.
For us to create content, right? Like, it's not like, hey, you're doing this for me for free. You know what I'm saying?
And one of the things we run into a lot is we try to help educate people because they see a contract as like a bad word, or like you don't trust them, or a lot of times it's people that just aren't familiar with the benefits of contract. They provide certainty. They lay out your relationship. You can figure out pain points ahead of time instead of after things blow up. And so, unfortunately, we've seen that sort of thing before where people don't like that. I hope you were able to bring her around.
Well, no, the thing is that she's fine. It was her friend who
Right.
she
Well,
had
and that brings me up to another point that we often see is so you were one of the good ones is saying, yes, bring a lawyer, review that
Yes.
contract, but it's also important to bring on the right lawyer, the lawyer who understands.
Right.
And no, I'm not dissing anybody, but
Right.
it's important to bring someone who understands the space, understands
Right.
the industry. This is typically how it goes. This is typically
Right.
how especially with IP rights. IP
Yes.
rights are huge in this
Yes.
industry, borrowing from traditional sports media, but it's very important to have the right players involved and the
Yes.
right representation. That way you can have someone who's looking at it has looked at similar things and
Right.
understands, this is common. No need to raise the alarms.
Right.
And you can avoid fire drills like
Or
that.
worse,
Yeah.
we see people that do the opposite of what do you do and say, no, you don't need to talk to a lawyer. We got this covered, right? That's always a red flag.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about some of the other cool things that you're working on? One of the things I've learned about this space is sometimes when teams are competing, whether here or even abroad, I think for the Fortnite Championship, didn't you have some famous teams come and train here in your facility?
Yeah, so they're actually here right now. Cease and Elevate, who are the number 2 or 3, I forgot. I just remember they won $1.8 million.
Lots of money.
Right.
Nothing to shake a stick at.
Right. Yeah. So 100 Thieves is here right now, and Team Liquid. They've collaborated to do, to compete in squads.
Great.
So they come in here, they use your facility to train.
To qualify and
Right.
train.
Okay.
And so we're really close to, their house, their training facilities in LA. And the Fortnite servers are here in, are on the East Coast.
Right.
So Atlanta is a great spot for them. And
And all the high res stuff.
well, yeah, but I mean, in terms of the Fortnite server specifically, the latency is less here than from being all the way across the country. So
gotcha.
they want that extra little bit, even if it's
that
milliseconds.
to me is fascinating that they're gonna come here. They're gonna bring all their players here for that lag, that latency. So, do you? I guess that's interesting with respect to making sure that your facilities are tip top and the
Yes.
latency is to a minimum.
Yes.
What are some of the things that you do to maintain that, I guess, competitive advantage over others?
Sure. So we have a partner, INAP, and they're our connectivity partner. Their algorithms. We have a pipe coming in with Comcast, which is our fiber provider, and then all of those signals are vetted through INAP, which does some sort of magical shit, and then poof, we have zero latency.
Right. It's a very impressive facility. We
Yes.
toured it as a part of the summit.
Yes.
And I walked away very impressed.
Thank you.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about the Esports Summit that had just occurred
Yes.
and some of the things maybe that you can take away from the summit. So I know that you're probably
Sure.
asking others, like, what do you think? What do you think? But what about you? What do you think
Yeah.
about the summit?
So number one, I thought, I really liked the summit and how it was done. So last year we were part of Esports Week Atlanta. And it was actually held here a year ago before we even opened our doors.
Really?
Yes. So the kickoff dinner with the mayor's office and a ton of legislators and all of the city of Atlanta and Georgia economic development, our partners, along with endemic and non-endemic brands, were all here. That's another story, but it was fun because we hadn't even opened yet, and I was taking people through tours of an empty space. there were desks and like nothing in here.
Imagine a bunch of computers.
That's
here.
exactly
Right.
what it was. That is exactly what it was. However, what they said was the tours piece was such a great part of the event, and for people like yourselves who've been to other Esports Bar Miami, and I think that's a value prop for what we do here,
Yeah.
what we did here.
Definitely.
Because you really got to immerse yourself into the ecosystem and then really see what esports and gaming and the community is about when you tie it in with a DreamHack, right? And you come in and you're like, holy crap, there are like 30,000 people toting their computers into
Yeah.
this, party.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Isn't it
And
festival?
also, don't overlook the time between events, and the one of my favorite things to do at these events is just to network and to get to know people in the space, and even the times going from point A to point B. It builds in that little networking time that you otherwise are sitting in a presentation, waiting for it to be over so that you can go outside and maybe meet some people. But sometimes they kind of congregate. But when you're forced to be on a bus going, or walk,
Yes.
or, you're just kind of talking about something you just went through,
Yes.
it actually opens up some pretty neat opportunities to network. And that actually is something that's pretty cool. Something
It
I
is.
experienced this past weekend. I thought that was pretty cool.
It is.
Very well done.
Yeah. Thank you.
So last topic, why don't you tell us a little bit about the recent announcement that happened with the Atlanta Esports Alliance? And if I butchered the name, correct it. But why don't you tell us a little bit about that project that was announced?
Yeah, so Atlanta, for the past 2 years, headed by the Atlanta Chamber of Commerce, has been holding esports think tank meetings, right? Just to kind of really expose or talk amongst the endemic brands about different things that are happening in Atlanta in regards to us and our ecosystem. And so I guess about a couple of months ago, it became, something where we were like, okay, we need to put together an alliance. What does that look like? How do we include the community? How do we funnel that energy and really focus it? And really, what's the end goal? And so the outcome of that was we're gonna have a state alliance, one that's all about the community, supporting, smaller venues even, right? Smaller LAN centers, things like that they could be a part of. But then we wanted to create the Atlanta Esports Alliance really to be about Georgia as a whole and what we're doing in Atlanta to get events here, to get, like all those RFPs that come in for, for the DreamHacks out there, right? And so the alliance was formed. The exciting part about it is that the alliance is formed in collaboration with the Atlanta Sports Council. And for those of you guys who don't know, the Atlanta Sports Council is responsible for bringing in the Olympics to Atlanta, bringing in the Super Bowl, the Final Four next year.
Yeah.
Really some very, very large, worldwide recognized events. And they are all in. Like, they're all in terms of esports, and esports as a part of the sports culture of Atlanta. So what the Esports Alliance is that it is the arm of the Sports Council in esports.
That's fantastic.
Talk
Talk about recognition, and you have arrived in Atlanta, and it's just a great way to build on the momentum that's already happened.
Yeah.
And to keep it going. That's one. And plus, that's on top of other recent news about, I think, the Reign having a facility. I don't know how large it is, but super large, and probably to host some of these events that hopefully can be brought to the city. So
absolutely. So we have 4 homestand events that are going to be happening in Atlanta next year. The Atlanta Reign is, building a training facility for themselves and the COD team.
Fantastic.
Yes. And so we're super excited about that. We work really closely with the Reign, but then also we have a great partnership with FaZe Clan, and so for them to come into the city,
I'm sure it's fun when they arrive.
Oh my gosh, we have a great time.
Have you done a pop-up merch shop here with them, and the line goes down the beltway?
Not yet, but we're talking about things.
Yeah. That's funny.
No, I mean it's really the thing about esports and gaming, it really is truly inclusive and very inviting, to everybody who wants to learn about it. And And
one of the great things. It brings everybody
Absolutely.
together. Doesn't matter what you look like. Doesn't matter where you come from.
Yes.
Various limitations people have. It all just kind of goes away,
Yeah.
and they get together and argue over who's the best character.
Yeah, and you know, when you look at what 2.5, 3 years ago when I first met Todd Harris and Nabil and you know, and I explained to them the concept of Access Replay, and Todd was like, "Oh, you mean like a battle and brew?" And I was like, "No, not like a battle and brew." But you know, it was like, oh, okay, well, would love to hear more about it, right?
Yeah,
and I was like, and just that right there. I mean, we would not be here without the help of all of our strategic partners who have been like, you know, I mean, from Maxnomic, right? I mean, and DreamHack,
The Georgia Developers Association.
Yeah, the GGDA and Economic Development in Georgia, Invest Atlanta. I mean, they have all been so amazing. Like, even just bringing press over here, you know, checking it out.
It happens all over in the space. People propping up others and helping each other, and they do. It's nice to see even businesses doing that in the space.
Yeah, and Atlanta has done it. And I mean, I've looked at some other areas, and you know, I mean, obviously, our goal is to scale and put an Access Replay into multiple markets.
Right.
And I have to tell you, like Atlanta, we only opened in January of this year.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
It's a special place. The community here, you know, everything you've been saying, they support it so much. There's a bunch of, you know, individuals and communities that are here that are all already interested in it.
Yes.
It's a perfect partnership with the state and the towns.
Yes.
And so, you know, we're not surprised that it's going well, but we're very glad to hear it.
Thank you. Well, thank you guys so much for coming.
Thank you for coming on the podcast. We really appreciate it. It was an honor to have you, and we look forward to seeing Access Replay in Miami, maybe, or you know, wherever else. Yeah, let's talk. I want to see it down there. So, but also elsewhere. But anyway, Allie, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Guys.
We
appreciate it.
You've been listening to the LAN Party Lawyers podcast series with Steve Blickensderfer and Nick Brown. To learn more about our e-gaming and esports practice, visit carltonfields.com. This podcast is intended for general information and educational purposes only and should not be relied on as if it were advice about a particular fact situation. The distribution of this podcast is not intended to create, and receipt of it does not constitute an attorney-client relationship with Carlton Fields. Thanks for listening.